The river was swallowing her alive, 200 pounds of dead weight, trapped behind a jammed door, lungs filling with black water that tasted like rust and gasoline, and the certainty of death. Raven Morrison had faced down rival clubs, hostile cops, and men twice her size who thought a woman had no business running anything, let alone a motorcycle club. She had survived knife fights and broken bones and betrayals that would have destroyed weaker people. But water doesn't care about your reputation. Water doesn't negotiate, water just takes. The impact had been brutal. One moment she was gripping the steering wheel, knuckles white, her mind still replaying the meeting that had ended 3 hours ago. The next headlights were flooding her peripheral vision. No warning, no brake lights, just a black SUV cutting into her lane with the kind of precision that spoke of intention, not accident. She had jerked the wheel instinctively. Muscle memory from 24 years of riding. But a car isn't a bike. A car doesn't lean into the turn. A car just slides. The guardrail had given way like it was made of cardboard. 1 second of resistance, then nothing. Just empty air and the stomach-dropping sensation of falling. The Silverado had hit the water nose first. The windshield exploded inward, 1,000 pounds of river forcing its way through every gap, every seal, every weakness in the frame. Raven's head had snapped forward, and something warm trickled down her temple. Pain burst behind her eyes, sharp and immediate. She reached for the door handle. Pulled. Nothing. The frame had crumpled on impact. The guardrail had folded into the driver's side door, wedging it shut with the finality of a coffin lid. She pulled harder, throwing her weight into it, but the metal didn't budge. Water was climbing her legs. Cold. So cold it stole the breath from her chest. Her boots filled first, then her jeans, the denim going heavy and clinging. The water reached her waist, her chest, her shoulders. Above her, she could see lights. Headlights, the glow of cell phone screens, shapes moving along the riverbank distorted and wavering through the murky water. People were watching. Nobody was coming. Raven Morrison, president of the Hells Angels Florida chapter for 8 years, leader of 150 men and women who would ride into fire for her, was going to die alone in 3 feet of dirty water while strangers filmed it for social media. The irony would have made her laugh if she had any air left. Her vision started to blur. Bubbles tore past her face, rising toward a surface she could no longer reach. Each breath burned. Each second felt heavier than the last. She thought about her father, wondered if this was how he'd felt at the end. Helpless, broken, alone. The water reached her chin, then her mouth, then her eyes. And Raven Morrison, who had never backed down from anything in her life, felt the fight drain out of her body like blood from an open wound. Somewhere above the surface, people were gathering. Voices blurred together into a meaningless hum. Someone shouted. Someone else pulled out a phone, the glow hovering along the riverbank like a firefly. But nobody stepped forward. The current was too strong, the night too cold, the risk too high. What those people didn't know, what Raven herself didn't know as the darkness closed in, was that someone was watching who didn't think about risk the same way they did. Someone who had nothing left to lose. Someone who had been asleep beneath the bridge 300 yards upstream when the sound of twisting metal and shattering glass tore through the night. Tracker Sullivan woke the way he always did. Instantly, completely, ready to run. You learn that fast when you live outside. Sleep is never deep, never safe. Every sound could be a threat. Every footstep could be someone coming to hurt you. Rob, you move you along. He was 18 years old and had been homeless for 8 months. 243 days if he was counting. And he was always counting. The cardboard shelter he'd built beneath the I-275 bridge wasn't much. Flattened boxes wedged between concrete support pillars. A blue tarp stolen from a construction site held down with rocks. A sleeping bag he'd found in a dumpster behind a sporting goods store, the zipper broken but the insulation still mostly intact. It kept the rain off most of the time. It kept him hidden from the road above. It kept him alive. That was all he needed. The sound that woke him wasn't rain. It wasn't thunder. It was sharper than that. Closer. The crack of metal under stress followed by a hollow boom that echoed off the concrete above his head. Tracker sat up, heart already racing. His hand went automatically to the folding knife he kept tucked inside his boot. Not because he wanted to fight, because sometimes you don't get a choice. He crawled out from under the tarp, blinking against the sodium glare of the streetlights overhead. The air was cold, damp, clinging to his skin through the thin jacket he'd worn for 3 months straight. His breath misted in front of his face. He looked toward the road. Headlights, swinging wildly, then disappearing, not fading into the distance, just gone, like someone had flipped a switch. Tracker stood. His legs ached. They always ached. Sleeping on concrete and cardboard didn't exactly promote restful nights. His shoes, worn smooth at the soles, slipped slightly on the loose gravel as he moved toward the riverbank. That's when he saw the crowd forming. 20 people, maybe more. Cars slowing, doors opening. The blue-white glow of cell phone screens lighting up faces that looked curious, concerned but not concerned enough to do anything about it. Tracker knew that look. He'd seen it every day for 8 months. The look of people who notice a problem but decide it's not their problem. The look of people who care just enough to feel bad about not caring more. He started running. Nobody else was moving. They were standing at the edge of the road, peering down at the water like they were watching a movie, pointing, talking, recording. Tracker hit the riverbank at a sprint. His boots skidded on wet grass, nearly sending him sprawling, but he caught himself and kept moving. The river was high, swollen from 3 days of rain, moving faster than it looked. In the middle of the current, barely visible in the weak light from the road, a truck sat half submerged. The hood was already under. Water poured through the broken windshield with the relentless patience of something that couldn't be stopped. Tracker didn't think. Thinking meant hesitation. Hesitation meant someone died. He kicked off his shoes and dove. The cold hit him like a fist to the chest. Every muscle in his body locked up, screaming at him to get out, get warm, get safe. The current grabbed him immediately, trying to drag him downstream away from the truck, away from whoever was inside. He fought it, kicking hard, arms pulling through water that felt thick as oil. His clothes dragged at him, soaked through in seconds, adding weight he couldn't afford. The distance to the truck felt impossible. Every stroke forward felt like half a stroke back. His lungs burned, his arms screamed. But he'd learned something in 8 months on the street. You don't give up just because something's hard. You give up when you're dead. And Tracker Sullivan wasn't dead yet. He reached the truck and grabbed the side mirror, pulling himself alongside. The water was up to the windows now. Through the driver's side glass, distorted and dark, he could see someone inside. Still moving, barely, Tracker pounded on the glass with his fist. The sound was muffled, distant, swallowed by the river's roar. He shouted, but his voice disappeared into the night. He grabbed the door handle, pulled. Nothing. The frame was crushed. The guardrail had folded into the door like a can opener, sealing it shut. Tracker braced his feet against the submerged guardrail and pulled again. His hands slipped on the cold metal. Skin tore. He didn't care. He pulled harder. The door groaned. Metal screamed. The seal broke. Water rushed in harder, but the door finally gave way. Tracker wedged it open with his shoulder and reached inside, wrapping his arms around the driver's weight. Heavy, solid, taller than he'd expected. He dragged the person free, fighting the current step by agonizing step. Lungs burning, legs shaking, refusing to let go. By the time they hit the shore, Tracker collapsed to his knees. The driver coughed violently, water spilling from their mouth as air tore back into their lungs. Around them, voices surged. People rushing forward now, hands grabbing, shouting for help. By the time the ambulance arrived, Tracker was already gone. He didn't wait for thanks, didn't give his name, just disappeared back into the shadows like he'd never been there. But what Tracker didn't see as he walked away, shivering and exhausted, was the woman he'd saved opening her eyes. Didn't hear her asking who'd pulled her out. Didn't know that she was the president of the most powerful motorcycle club in Florida. And he definitely didn't know that within hours, 150 Hells Angels would begin the largest search operation Tampa had ever seen. All for him. 8 months earlier, Tracker Sullivan had been someone different. His real name was Dylan Reed Sullivan. His friends called him Track because he'd been the fastest runner on his high school cross-country team. His parents called him their miracle because he'd been born 6 weeks premature, and the doctors said he wouldn't make it through the night. He made it, and kept making it through everything life threw at him, until the night everything ended. It was September 14th, his 18th birthday, His parents had taken him to his favorite restaurant, a small Italian place his mother loved because they made the pasta fresh, and his father loved because they had a wine list he actually understood. They talked about college, about Florida State University, where Tracker had earned a full academic scholarship, about dorm rooms and meal plans, and whether his old laptop would survive another 4 years or if they should budget for a new one. His mother had been excited, his father cautious but proud, both of them looking at their son like he was everything they'd hoped for and more. They never made it home. The call came at 9:47 p.m. Tracker had been in his room packing for a weekend camping trip with friends when he heard his phone ring. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. He wished he hadn't. Two police officers, young, uncomfortable, using voices people use when they're about to destroy your world and they know it. There had been an accident, a high-speed chase, suspects fleeing a trafficking bust on I-75, stolen van running red lights at 90 miles per hour through residential neighborhoods. His parents' Camry had been hit at the intersection of Dale Mabry and Kennedy Boulevard. Driver's side impact. Estimated speed 75 miles per hour. The coroner said they died instantly. Tracker didn't cry. Couldn't. His brain refused to process the information. It was like hearing words in a foreign language. They made sounds, but the sounds didn't mean anything. The funeral was 3 days later. Extended family flew in from across the country. People he barely knew hugging him, telling him how sorry they were, how strong he was being, how proud his parents would be. He still didn't cry. Social services showed up 2 weeks after the funeral. A tired woman with kind eyes and a clipboard full of forms. She explained his options with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd given this speech too many times. He was 18, legally an adult, but with no job, no income, and a mortgage he couldn't pay, he needed help. Option 1, adult shelters, temporary housing while he figured things out. Option 2, extended foster care. He qualified by age. A family in Temple Terrace had space. Good people. They'd help him transition. Option 3, family. Did he have any relatives who could take him in? He had an uncle in Ohio, his father's brother. They'd met twice in Tracker's entire life. The man didn't even come to the funeral, just sent flowers and a card that said, "Sorry for your loss," in someone else's handwriting. Tracker chose option 2, the Hendersons. What else could he do? Frank and Carol Henderson seemed nice at first. Mid-50s, empty nesters, their own children grown and moved away. They had a spare bedroom with a decent bed and a window that looked out over a backyard with a pool. Carol baked cookies the first day. Frank asked about his college plans. They seemed genuinely interested in helping him get back on his feet. It lasted 6 weeks. The problem wasn't abuse, not the kind people imagine. Nobody hit him, nobody locked him in his room or withheld food. It was more subtle than that, more insidious. It was the way Carol looked at him when he came home from school, like he was a problem she hadn't signed up for, a disruption to the quiet retirement she'd been planning. It was the way Frank talked about him in the third person when he was standing right there. The foster kid. Our placement. The boy. Never Tracker, never Dylan, never his actual name. It was the way they made him eat dinner in his room when they had company because it would be awkward to explain. The way his 18th birthday passed 3 months after he moved in without acknowledgement. The way they talked about the state stipend they received for housing him like it was payment for tolerating his presence. The suffocating realization that he was a checkbox on a form. A monthly deposit. Nothing more. He left on a Tuesday night in February. Didn't pack much. Everything he owned fit in a backpack. Clothes, toothbrush, a photo of his parents from their 20th wedding anniversary, the acceptance letter from FSU that didn't mean anything anymore. He walked out the front door while the Hendersons watched television. Neither of them looked up. That was 8 months ago. Tracker learned fast how survival worked when you had nothing. How to avoid the police who would send him back to foster care or worse. How to avoid the older homeless men who saw a skinny kid and thought easy target. How to avoid the gang recruiters who worked the parks and underpasses. He learned which gas stations would let him use the bathroom without buying anything. Which fast food places threw out food that was still good if you waited by the dumpster at closing time. Which churches offered free meals on which days. He learned that invisible was safe. That drawing attention, any attention, was dangerous. He found the spot under the I-275 bridge in April. It wasn't claimed, no one else's belongings stashed there, no territorial markings, just empty space beneath concrete and rebar where the highway roared overhead and most people never looked down. It became home. Not a good home, not a safe home, but his. He'd been there 4 months when he heard the crash that would change everything. The morning of the crash, Tracker woke before dawn like he always did. Sleep didn't come easy anymore, and when it did, it never lasted long. He crawled out from under his tarp and took stock. $3.47 in his pocket. Enough for a breakfast sandwich at McDonald's if he was careful. Half a bottle of water, the clothes on his back that smelled like river water and exhaust, and the particular staleness that came from not having access to a shower in 3 weeks. He needed to move. The homeless encampment 200 yards east was growing. More people every week, which meant more attention. More police, more sweeps. Tracker had learned to stay ahead of the sweeps. Move before they came. Keep a low profile. Don't get comfortable. He rolled up his sleeping bag, stuffed it in his backpack, and started walking along the riverbank toward the underpass. That's when he saw them. 2 men, standing near the guardrail on the highway above. Not walking, not moving, just standing there looking down at something. Tracker stopped, watched. One of the men pulled something from a duffel bag, long, metal. It took Tracker a second to recognize it. Bolt cutters, industrial grade, the kind you use to cut through chain link fences or padlocks. The man positioned the cutters against the guardrail, leaned his weight into them. Metal screamed, once, twice, 3 times, 4. The other man kept watch, looking up and down the highway, making sure no one saw. But they didn't look down, didn't see the homeless kid standing beneath the bridge, frozen in place, watching them sabotage a guardrail on a major highway. Tracker's hand went to his pocket, to the cheap prepaid phone he'd bought 3 months ago with money he'd saved from panhandling. $15 at a convenience store. No plan, no minutes left, but it still had a camera. He lifted it, aimed, took 4 photos before his hands started shaking. The men finished their work, packed up their tools, got into a black SUV parked on the shoulder, and drove away. Tracker stood there for a long time staring at the damaged guardrail, trying to understand what he'd just witnessed. Someone was going to hit that rail. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow. And when they did, it was going to give way like it was made of paper. He should tell someone, call the police, report it. But Tracker Sullivan didn't call the police because the police meant questions. Questions meant attention. Tension meant getting pulled back into the system, and he'd rather die than go back to the Hendersons. So he did nothing, just walked away. Deleted the photos from his recent folder so they wouldn't eat up his limited storage. Tried to forget about it. 12 hours later, he heard the crash. Saw headlights disappear into the river. Watched a truck sink beneath black water. And he realized with the kind of sick certainty that sits in your gut like poison that he could have prevented it. That someone was dying because he'd been too scared to make a phone call. That realization, more than the cold water or the fear or the exhaustion, was what drove him into that river. Not heroism, not courage, guilt. Raven Morrison woke to the smell of antiseptic and the steady beep of machines. For a moment, she didn't know where she was, didn't know how she'd gotten there. Her body felt wrong, heavy, disconnected. She tried to move and pain exploded through her left side. Ribs, broken probably. Her head throbbed. Something tight wrapped around her skull. Bandages. Memory came back in fragments. The meeting, the drive home, headlights, the river, water filling her lungs, someone pulling her out. A kid, young, skinny, eyes wide with fear and determination. Easy. A voice to her right, male, familiar. You're in Tampa, General. You've been out for 6 hours. Raven turned her head, ignoring the spike of pain the movement caused. Dutch Kane sat in the chair beside her bed, looking like he hadn't slept. His vice president patch was visible under his leather jacket. His face was tight with worry. What happened? Her voice came out rough, damaged, like she'd been screaming or drowning. Your truck went into the river off I-275, Dutch said. Guardrail failed. You went through. Raven closed her eyes. processed. The kid who pulled me out. Where is he? Dutch shook his head. Gone. Disappeared before the paramedics arrived. Nobody got a name. Nobody knows who he was. Find him. Raven. I said find him. Her voice had steel in it now. The voice that had kept 150 bikers in line for 8 years. The voice that didn't ask twice. Dutch nodded. Already working on it. Got descriptions from witnesses. Skinny kid, maybe 18. Torn clothes, looked homeless. Hands were bleeding from pulling your door open. Homeless. That detail stuck. A kid with nothing had risked everything for a stranger. The door to the hospital room opened. 2 police officers stepped in, followed by a detective in a rumpled suit. Ms. Morrison, the detective said, pulling out a notebook. I'm Detective Marcus Reyes. I need to ask you some questions about the accident. It wasn't an accident, Raven said flatly. Reyes paused. Ma'am, someone ran me off the road. Black SUV, no plates I could see. They hit me deliberately. Reyes and the officers exchanged a look. Are you sure? Could it have been? I'm sure. Raven's eyes were hard, and I know exactly who ordered it. The detective's expression shifted, became more focused. We'll need details, but at first there's something you should know. We examined the crash site, the guardrail. He pulled out his phone, showed her a photo. Close-up of metal, cut marks, clean, precise, made with tools not damaged by impact. Someone sabotaged it, Reyes said. Cut through the support structure. Left just enough that it would hold under normal stress but fail on impact. This was premeditated, Ms. Morrison. Attempted murder. Raven stared at the photo, at the evidence of calculation, of planning. They hadn't just tried to kill her. They'd set a trap and waited for her to drive into it. Victor Stone, she said quietly. He runs trafficking operations out of South Tampa. I refused to let him use our territory. This was his response. Dutch shifted uncomfortably. The officers were writing everything down. Reyes just nodded like he'd expected as much. We'll need a formal statement, the detective said. Everything you know about Stone and his operation. You'll get it, Raven promised. But first I need to find the kid who saved me. Reyes frowned. We have witness statements. We don't need... This isn't about your case, detective. Raven's voice was quiet but absolute. That boy risked his life for mine when everyone else just filmed it. I owe him a debt, and I pay my debts. After the police left, Dutch leaned back in his chair. You really want to mobilize everyone to find one homeless kid? Yes. People are going to ask questions. Wonder why we're putting so much effort into... Let them wonder. Raven looked at him steadily. What would you do if someone pulled you out of a sinking car while 20 people stood there recording? Dutch was quiet for a moment, then nodded. I'll make the calls. And Dutch, at Raven's voice, stopped him at the door. I want to know everything about Victor Stone's operation. Every route, every contact, every dirty cop on his payroll. If he wants war, we'll give him war, but we'll do it the right way. Legal, legal, Raven confirmed. We're not the criminals here. We're the ones who said no to harming kids. Make sure people remember that. The meeting that had started everything had taken place 24 hours before the crash. Raven had been in the Angels clubhouse on the outskirts of Tampa when Victor Stone walked in like he owned the place. He hadn't asked permission, hadn't made an appointment, just showed up with 2 bodyguards flanking him. Expensive suit, slicked back hair, the kind of smile that never touched his eyes. Raven had been working on club finances at the main table. Dutch beside her, 3 other Angels in the room, present, watching. A reminder that Stone was in their territory now. Thank you for seeing me, Stone had said, though his tone suggested he'd expected nothing less. Raven stayed seated. You have 5 minutes. Make them count. Stone's smile widened slightly. Direct. I appreciate that. Let me be equally direct. I run logistics, distribution. I have routes through Florida that need reliable partners. We're not in the drug business. I'm not asking you to sell, just to allow passage. Your territory, your protection. Very lucrative arrangement. $50,000 a month. Cash. Just for looking the other way when my shipments come through. No. The word hung in the air, flat, Final. Stone's smile faded. You haven't heard my full offer. I don't need to. We don't move drugs. We don't protect people who do. That's not negotiable. Everything's negotiable. Stone leaned forward. There's also another aspect to my business. Moving people. High-value cargo. Needs discrete routes. Your highways would be perfect. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Raven's voice when she spoke was very quiet. Say that again. Stone either didn't notice the danger or didn't care. Human cargo, mostly young, mostly female. Very profitable market if you know the right buyers. I could cut you in for get out. Excuse me. Raven stood, slowly. Dutch and the other angels shifting with her. You walk into my house and tell me you traffic children, and you expect me to help you. I expect you to be smart, Stone said. This is happening whether you participate or not. I'm offering you a chance to profit instead of... My father was trafficked, Raven interrupted. Her voice was controlled, too controlled. Taken from Juarez when he was 10 years old. Sold to a factory in Los Angeles. Worked 16-hour days until he was 14 and managed to escape. Stone's expression didn't change. He never recovered, Raven continued. The trauma broke something in him. He tried to build a normal life, got married, had me, but the nightmares never stopped. The fear never stopped. When I was 15, he put a gun in his mouth and pulled the trigger because he couldn't live with the memories anymore. The room was silent. So when you come into my clubhouse and tell me you want to use my roads to do to other children what was done to my father, there's only one answer you're going to get. She stepped closer, Dutch and the others moving with her. Get out. Stone stood slowly, straightened his jacket. The smile was gone now, replaced with something colder. You're making a very dangerous enemy, Ms. Morrison. I've had dangerous enemies before, Raven replied. They didn't end well. We'll see. Stone turned toward the door, then paused. Accidents happen, Raven. Roads can be dangerous, especially at night. You should be careful. Then he was gone. Bodyguards following, the door closing with a soft click. Dutch had exhaled slowly. That was a threat. That was a promise, Raven corrected, which means we need to be ready. But she hadn't been ready, not for how fast Stone would move, not for how brutal his response would be. 12 hours later, she'd been in the river drowning, certain she was going to die. And a homeless kid she'd never met had decided her life was worth saving. Now lying in a hospital bed with broken ribs and a concussion, Raven made a decision. She was going to find that kid. She was going to protect him because Stone would come after anyone who helped her. She was going to give him the family he clearly didn't have. And then she was going to destroy Victor Stone's operation so thoroughly that he'd wish he'd never heard the name Raven Morrison. But first she needed to get out of this hospital. She pressed the call button for the nurse. When the woman appeared, Raven smiled. The kind of smile that had convinced more than one person to do something they knew they shouldn't. I need to discharge myself, she said, against medical advice if necessary. The nurse frowned. Ms. Morrison, you have 3 broken ribs, a severe concussion, and significant internal bruising. You need to stay for observation. I need to find someone, Raven said. Someone who saved my life, and every hour I'm in here is an hour he's in danger. I really can't recommend. I'm not asking for a recommendation. Raven's voice was gentle but firm. I'm telling you I'm leaving. You can make it official, or I can walk out right now in this hospital gown. Your choice. The nurse sighed. I'll get the paperwork. 3 hours later, Raven walked out of Tampa General wearing borrowed clothes from Dutch's truck, moving carefully to avoid jostling her ribs. Her head still throbbed, but pain was manageable. Pain always was if you had enough practice. The clubhouse was waiting, not just her chapter. Word had spread fast. Angels from Orlando had arrived within hours of the crash. Jacksonville, Fort Myers, Sarasota. They'd started rolling in as soon as they heard their Florida president had almost been killed. By the time Raven arrived, there were nearly 100 bikes in the parking lot, more arriving every hour. She walked through the door to absolute silence. Every eye in the room turned to her. Concern, relief, anger on her behalf. Family. Raven moved to the front of the room, ignoring the pain in her ribs, and looked at the assembled angels. Victor Stone tried to kill me last night, she said, her voice carried in the quiet, because I wouldn't let him traffic children through our territory, because I told him that kids are sacred and I'd never help anyone who harms them. Murmurs of anger rippled through the crowd. He failed, Raven continued, because a homeless kid I've never met dove into that river while everyone else just watched and filmed. He risked everything, got me out, saved my life, then disappeared like he was never there. She paused. Let that sink in. We're going to find him. Every chapter, every member. We search this city until we locate him. Shelters, soup kitchens, underpasses, parks, anywhere someone without a home might be. An older angel in the back, Hawk 50-something, with a scar from temple to jaw, spoke up. With respect, President is that wise, mobilizing everyone for one kid. Stone's still out there. We should be focused on... Stone can wait, Raven interrupted, her voice hardened. This boy saved my life when no one else moved. He's family now, and we protect family. That's not negotiable. But no, Raven's eyes were steel. I refuse to help Stone traffic children. I'm not going to turn around and abandon a kid who actually gave a damn when it mattered. We find him, we protect him, we make sure he's safe. Because if I won't do that, then what was the point of saying no to Stone in the first place? She looked around the room, challenging anyone to disagree. No one did. We start at dawn, Raven said. Teams of 3, cover every sector of this city. Someone out there knows who he is, where he sleeps. We find him, we bring him in, we make sure Stone's people don't get to him first. And Stone, Dutch asked. Raven's smile was cold, sharp. We're going to destroy him. Every route, every operation, every contact. But we do it legally, through law enforcement, through the courts. We prove that we're not the criminals here, that we're the ones who stand between predators and children. She straightened despite the pain. Victor Stone wanted to turn us into monsters. Instead, we're going to show this city what it looks like when people with power choose to protect the powerless, starting with one homeless kid who deserves better than what this world's given him. The room erupted, not in cheers, in the low rumble of engines, in the sound of leather and chains and boots, in readiness. By midnight, the number had reached 150. 150 Hells Angels from across Florida, all gathering for a single purpose, to find a homeless kid who'd saved their president's life, to bring him home, to prove that family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up when the water's rising. Dawn broke cold over Tampa, painting the sky in shades of gray and amber. 150 motorcycles rolled out from the Angels clubhouse in formation. Not a show of force, a statement of purpose. The rumble of their engines echoed through empty streets, announcing to anyone paying attention that something significant was happening. Raven stood in the parking lot watching them go. Her ribs ached despite the pain medication. Her head still throbbed, but she'd refused to stay behind. Dutch appeared beside her, holding out a helmet. You're sure about this? You should be resting. I'll rest when we find him. Raven took the helmet. Where are we searching? Ybor City and the eastern shelters. We've got teams covering downtown, the Port District, Temple Terrace, and everything in between. Dutch pulled out a map showing her the grid they'd created. Someone will have seen him. Someone always sees. Raven nodded, mounted her bike. The pain in her ribs flared as she settled into the seat, but she pushed it down. Pain was just information. You could choose what to do with it. They rode east into the rising sun. The first shelter they visited was a converted church on Nebraska Avenue. Sister Margaret, who'd been running it for 20 years, listened to their description and studied the grainy photo Dutch showed her. Skinny kid, 18, torn clothes, she repeated. That describes half the young men who come through here. He would have had bandaged hands, Raven said, torn up from pulling open a car door. Would have been here maybe 3-4 months ago. Sister Margaret's expression shifted. Recognition. There was a boy, Dylan he said his name was, quiet, polite, always said thank you for the meals. Stopped coming about 3 weeks ago. Why'd he stop? I don't know. Kids drift, they find other places, or they leave the city entirely. She paused. But I remember him because he was different. Most of the young ones who come through, they're angry, hardened. This boy was just sad, like he was grieving something. Did he ever mention where he was staying? Dutch asked. No, but one of the other regulars might know. There's a man goes by Preacher. He looks out for the younger kids, keeps them safe when he can. He might have talked to your boy. Where can we find Preacher? He usually sets up under the overpass on 22nd Street around noon, sells recycled cans to make money. You can't miss him. Tall gray beard, always wears a red baseball cap. They found Preacher exactly where Sister Margaret said he'd be. He was in his 60s, weathered by decades of street life, but his eyes were sharp and assessing when he saw the angels approaching. Not looking for trouble, Dutch said, hands visible. Just information. About what? Preacher's voice was cautious. A kid, 18, skinny, been on the street about 8 months. Raven showed him the photo. Might have been calling himself Dylan. Preacher studied the image. Might have seen him. Why you looking? He saved my life, Raven said simply. Pulled me out of a sinking car. Disappeared before I could thank him. Now he's in danger and I need to find him before someone else does. Preacher watched her face, reading truth from lies the way you learn to when survival depends on it. What kind of danger? The kind that comes from bad people who don't like witnesses, Dutch said. Preacher was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. The boy you're looking for is smart, careful, doesn't trust easy, moves around a lot to avoid trouble. Do you know where he is now? Last I heard, he was sleeping under the I-275 bridge, east side, but that was before. Preacher paused. Before he saved someone from the river. Now he's probably gone. Kid like that, he knows how to disappear. We need to find him before the people who tried to kill me do, Raven said. Can you help? Preacher pulled off his cap, ran a hand through gray hair. There's a little girl, 9 years old, goes by Wren. She's been on the street about 6 months. Your boy Dylan, he looks out for her sometimes. Shares food when he has it. Keeps the older guys from bothering her. Where's this girl? Moves around, but I saw her yesterday near the port. Abandoned warehouse on 28th Street. Used to be a carpet factory. If your boy's protecting her, he might be there too. Raven pulled out her wallet, extracted $500 in cash, handed it to Preacher. For helping. Preacher looked at the money. I didn't do this for payment. I know. Take it anyway. For the kids you help. He pocketed the bills. You find that boy, you tell him Preacher says he did good. Saving a life when everyone else just watched. That takes character. I will. As they turned to leave, Preacher called after them. One more thing. There have been other people asking questions. Not cops, not angels. Different crew. They've been hitting the same shelters, asking about a kid who pulled someone from the river. Raven's blood went cold. When? Started yesterday. 3 men, black SUV. They're not as polite as you folks. If they come back, Dutch said, don't tell them anything. These are bad people. I spent 40 years on these streets, Preacher replied. I know bad people when I see them. Why you think I'm talking to you? The warehouse near the port was exactly as Preacher described. Abandoned, windows broken, graffiti scarring the walls. The kind of place the city had forgotten. Dutch parked his bike 2 blocks away. The other 2 angels on his team did the same. Raven had continued to other locations with her group, but Dutch had promised to call if he found anything. He approached on foot, moving quietly despite his size. The entrance was a rusted door hanging askew on broken hinges. Dutch slipped through, eyes adjusting to the dim interior. 2 figures sat against the far wall. A teenage boy, tall but painfully thin, hands wrapped in dirty bandages, exactly matching the descriptions from witnesses. And beside him, a little girl, small, too young to be out here alone. The boy saw Dutch immediately, tensed. His hand moved protectively toward the girl. Dutch raised his hand slowly. Easy, I'm not here to cause trouble. Then why are you here? The boy's voice was wary, defensive, ready to run. Looking for someone, Tracker Sullivan. The boy's expression didn't change, but Dutch saw the micro flinch. The tell. You know him. Who's asking yet? My name's Dutch Kane. I'm with the Hells Angels. Raven Morrison sent me. Don't know her. I think you do. Dutch took a careful step closer. I think you pulled her out of the Hillsborough River 3 nights ago. I think you saved her life and then disappeared. The boy said nothing, but his hands, those bandaged hands, clenched slightly. Those look painful, Dutch observed, nodding toward the bandages. I'm fine. You're not. Dutch shifted his weight, making himself less threatening. Sat down on a broken crate 10 feet away. Look, I'm not here to drag you anywhere. I just want to talk. Raven wants to thank you properly. I don't want anything. I believe you, but you're in danger anyway. The boy's eyes narrowed. What kind of danger? Dutch glanced at the little girl, then back. The woman you pulled from that river. The crash wasn't an accident. Someone tried to kill her, cut the guardrail beforehand, set a trap. He watched the information land, saw the boy's face pale. The people who did it, Dutch continued quietly, they know someone pulled Raven out. They know there's a witness, and Victor Stone doesn't leave witnesses alive. The little girl spoke for the first time. Who's Victor Stone? Dutch looked at her. Someone very bad, someone who hurts people. She nodded like this made sense, like she'd encountered bad people before. I didn't see who cut the guardrail, the boy said quickly. Just the car going in, just her trapped. Are you sure about that? Something flickered in the boy's expression. There were photos, Dutch said gently, on a phone recovered from a shelter on Henderson Street. Deleted but retrievable. Photos of two men cutting through a highway guardrail, time-stamped 6:47 a.m. the morning Raven was run off the road. The boy's breathing had gone shallow. That's your phone, isn't it, Tracker? Dutch used the name deliberately. You saw them, took pictures, didn't know what you were seeing, but you documented it anyway. I deleted those. Deleted isn't gone, not permanently. Dutch leaned forward slightly. Those photos are evidence, proof of premeditated, attempted murder. With your testimony about what you saw, when and where we can prosecute Stone. I'm nobody. Why would anyone believe me? Because you have proof. Because you're telling the truth. Dutch's voice softened, and because 8 children are counting on it. What children? Dutch told him. About the trafficking operation. About the raid 2 days ago. About the victims found locked in rooms, some as young as 7. The little girl Wren listened with an expression too old for her face. Stone traffics kids, Dutch finished. That's what Raven refused to help him do. That's why he tried to kill her. And if we can't prosecute him, he keeps destroying lives. Wren turned to Tracker. You should help them. It's dangerous, Tracker protested. So is this. She gestured to the warehouse, to their makeshift shelter, to the life they were living. At least that way it means something. Tracker stared at her, this 9-year-old who'd already learned that sometimes survival meant taking risks. I'll talk to Raven, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. But Wren comes with me. Wherever I go, she goes. That's non-negotiable. Dutch studied them both, saw the bond there, the only family either of them had. All right, he agreed, but we need to move now. Stone's people are looking for you too. They've been hitting shelters, asking questions. The longer you stay out here, the more danger you're in. How do I know you're not lying? Tracker asked. How do I know this isn't some trick? Dutch pulled out his phone, called Raven, put it on speaker. Did you find him? Raven's voice came through clear. Yeah, he's here, safe, but he's scared. Put him on. Dutch handed the phone to Tracker. The boy took it hesitantly. Tracker Sullivan, Raven's voice was gentle. Yeah. Thank you for saving my life. I know you didn't have to. I know it would have been safer to walk away, but you didn't, and I'm grateful. Tracker said nothing, didn't know what to say. Dutch told you about the danger, Raven continued. About Stone, that's real. But so is my promise. If you come in, if you let us protect you, we will. Whether you testify or not, whether you help us or not, you saved my life. That makes you family, and we protect family. Why should I believe you? Because I have nothing to gain by lying to you. Because I just mobilized 150 people to search for someone whose name I didn't even know. Because family isn't something I take lightly. There was a pause. My parents died 8 months ago, Tracker said quietly. The drunk driver who hit them was fleeing a trafficking bust. That's why I was homeless. That's why I ended up under that bridge. Raven's voice softened even further. I'm sorry, that's not fair. None of this is fair. So when you ask if I'll help you stop Stone, Tracker continued, a voice strengthening. The answer is yes, not because I owe you, but because he's the same kind of monster that killed my parents. Then we stand together, Raven said. Dutch will bring you in. We'll keep you safe. And when you're ready, we'll make sure Stone pays for everything he's done. 20 minutes later, Tracker and Wren were in Dutch's truck. The other angels followed on their bikes, forming a protective convoy. Wren sat between Tracker and Dutch, clutching a small backpack. Everything she owned. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere safe," Dutch replied. "Somewhere Stone's people can't reach you." "Will there be food?" The question asked so simply broke Dutch's heart a little. "Yeah, kid, there'll be food. As much as you want." Wren nodded, satisfied. Then her eyes went to the side mirror, watching the motorcycles following behind them. "Are they all coming because of him?" She pointed at Tracker. "Yeah." "Why, because he saved someone important to them. Because that's what family does." Wren considered this. "I've never had family." "You do now," Dutch said. The clubhouse looked different in daylight, larger, more substantial. Not some run-down biker bar, but an actual compound with security and organization. Tracker felt Wren press close to his side as they walked toward the entrance. The main room was maybe half full now, 40-50 people, all eyes turning as they entered. Then a woman stepped forward from a group near the bar. Tall, 6 feet at least, broad shoulders, moving carefully like her ribs hurt. Dark hair pulled back, a scar through her left eyebrow, bandages at her temple. Raven Morrison. She stopped a few feet away studying them. Her gaze moved from Tracker to Wren and back. "Tracker Sullivan," she said. A statement, not a question. "Yeah. I'm Raven. You saved my life." Her voice was quiet, sincere. "Thank you." Tracker managed a nod, didn't trust his voice. Raven's expression softened. "You're safe here, both of you. Nobody's going to hurt you." She gestured to a table in the corner. "Come, sit. We need to talk about what happens next." As they walked across the room, Tracker noticed people nodding. Not hostile, acknowledging, like he'd already earned something just by being here. They sat, Raven across from them, Dutch standing nearby. "I'm going to be direct," Raven began. "You have choices to make. First about the photos, the evidence, whether you're willing to testify against Victor Stone." "Dutch told me about the children," Tracker said. "The ones who were rescued. 8 of them, ages 7 to 14, held in conditions," she paused, "conditions no child should ever experience. And Stone did that. His organization, yes. The raid happened because we've been building a case, but it's not enough. He insulates himself, has lawyers, without direct evidence connecting him to the operation he might walk. And my photos are that evidence. They're part of it. They prove the guardrail was sabotaged. With your testimony about when and where you took them, we can connect it to the attempt on my life, which opens doors to investigating his other operations." Trackers looked at Wren, at this little girl who had told him to do something that mattered. "What happens if I say yes?" "Then you work with law enforcement, give statements, eventually testify in court. It could take months. It'll be hard. Stone's lawyers will try to discredit you. But we'll be there. We'll protect you. And if we win, he goes to prison for life. And if I say no, then we still protect you, still offer you a place here if you want it. Testifying isn't a condition of safety. You're under our protection either way." Tracker was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You should know something about my parents, about why they died." Raven waited. They were hit by a drunk driver, fleeing a trafficking bust. The guy stole a van, ran from police, killed them because he was more worried about getting caught than about who else got hurt. His voice steadied. "So when you ask if I'll help prosecute someone who traffics children, the answer is yes. Not because you saved me, but because I've already lost everything to people like Stone. If I can stop him from destroying other families, it's worth the risk." Raven nodded slowly. "Then we stand together." She turned to Dutch. "Get them set up in the safe house. Full protection detail. Nobody in or out without my approval." "What about me?" Wren asked suddenly, her voice small but firm. Raven looked at her. Really looked. Saw a 9-year-old who'd survived things no child should have to survive. "What about you?" "Tracker says I can stay with him. Is that true?" "It's true. We'll find you both a safe place, and for you, Wren will find proper placement. A good foster family, somewhere they'll actually care." No, Ren's voice hardened. No foster care. I'm not going back. Ren, Tracker started. I said no. She looked at Raven. Foster families don't care. They just want the money. I've been in 4 different homes in 2 years. Every one was worse than the last. I'd rather stay on the street. Raven knelt down to her eye level. I can't promise every foster family is good, but I can promise that if you let us place you, we'll make sure they are. We'll check. We'll monitor. And if anything goes wrong, you come straight back to us. How do I know you'll keep that promise? Because I know what it's like to lose people, Raven said quietly. My father died when I was 15. The system failed him, failed me. I won't let it fail you. Ren studied her face, looking for lies, finding none. Okay, she said finally, but if they're mean, I'm leaving. Fair enough. As Dutch prepared to take them to the safe house, Raven pulled Tracker aside. One more thing. There's someone coming tomorrow, FBI agent. She'll want your statement. Want to see the photos. Are you ready for that? I don't know, Tracker admitted. Nobody's ever ready, but you'll do fine. Just tell the truth. That's all they need. The safe house was a 2-bedroom apartment above an auto shop on the north side of Tampa. Clean, furnished, a refrigerator full of actual food. Tracker stood in the middle of the living room trying to process. This morning he had woken up in an abandoned warehouse. Now he had walls, a roof, a door that locked from the inside. Ren had gone straight to the refrigerator and stood there staring at the contents like she couldn't believe they were real. You can eat whatever you want, Dutch said gently. It's all for you. She pulled out an apple, bit into it, closed her eyes like it was the best thing she'd ever tasted. How long can we stay here? Tracker asked. As long as you need. This is yours now. Both of you. Dutch set a burner phone on the counter. You need anything you call. Someone will be watching the building 24/7. If Stone's people come anywhere near you, we'll know. After Dutch left Tracker and Ren sat on the couch, neither quite believing this was real. Do you think they mean it? Ren asked. About protecting us. I think so. Why, Mom? Because, Tracker paused. Because I think they actually care. I know that sounds crazy, but the way Raven talked, the way she looked at you, I don't think she's lying. Ren was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I hope you're right. That night, Tracker slept in a real bed for the first time in 8 months. Ren took the second bedroom after making Tracker promise twice that he wouldn't leave without telling her. He lay awake for a long time staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how his life had changed so dramatically in 72 hours. 3 days ago, he'd been invisible, homeless, alone. Now he was a witness in an attempted murder case, under the protection of the Hells Angels, living in an apartment with running water and food and safety. It felt like a dream, the kind that couldn't possibly last. But when he finally fell asleep for the first time in 8 months, he didn't wake up at every sound. Because for the first time in 8 months, he wasn't alone anymore. The FBI arrived the next morning. Special Agent Sarah Brennan was in her mid-30s, professional and direct. She listened to Tracker's statement without interruption, taking notes in precise handwriting. The photos are time-stamped, she said after he finished. We've identified the 2 men, Marcus Webb and Tony Delgado, both known associates of Victor Stone. Is that enough? Raven asked from her position by the window where she'd been watching the street. It's a start, Brennan replied. But Stone's insulated. We need more to reach him directly. We need witnesses who can connect him to the trafficking operation. How do we get that? We work the case, put pressure on Webb and Delgado, get one of them to flip, follow the money, build it piece by piece. How long? Months, maybe longer. These things take time. Raven nodded. We'll be patient, as long as it takes. After Brennan left, Tracker asked the question that had been bothering him. What if they don't flip? What if Stone gets away with it? Raven turned from the window. Then we find another way. But we don't give up. We keep fighting until we win, or there's nothing left to fight for. Why does this matter so much to you? Because my father died from what trafficking did to him. Because I refuse to let that happen to anyone else if I can prevent it. And because you deserve justice for your parents, just like those 8 children deserve justice for what happened to them. She sat down across from him. This isn't just about stopping Stone. It's about proving that people who do evil things don't get to win. That there are still people willing to fight for what's right even when it's hard. Tracker nodded slowly. My parents would have liked you. Raven smiled. I would have liked them too. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected. Within a week, the FBI had enough pressure on Webb and Delgado that one of them cracked. Delgado. He gave up locations, contacts, patterns of operation. 2 weeks after Tracker gave his statement, they raided the trafficking house. Raven got the call from Brennan at 6 a.m. We found them, 8 children, we got them out. Raven closed her eyes. Are they safe? They're getting medical care, therapy, proper placements. It'll take time, but they're safe now. And Stone, still free. His lawyers are already working on the disconnect. But we're building the case. This raid gives us leverage. After she hung up, Raven went to tell Tracker. He was in the auto shop below the apartment, learning basic mechanics from one of the angels who worked there. His hands, finally healed from the river rescue, were covered in grease. They found the children, she said. 8 of them. Got them out. Tracker's hands stilled on the engine he'd been working on. Are they okay? They will be, eventually. He nodded, went back to work. But Raven saw his hands shaking slightly. Later, she found him sitting on the apartment steps, staring at nothing. You all right? I keep thinking, he said quietly, if I'd called the police when I saw them cutting the guardrail, if I'd reported it, would you have crashed? Would they have found those kids sooner? Raven sat beside him. You can't think like that. You were surviving, making the best choices you could with what you knew. But you saved my life, she interrupted, when everyone else just watched. That matters. That counts. Don't let guilt steal that from you. They sat in silence for a moment. One of the children, Raven said, she's 9 years old. Her name is Wren, too. Different girl, but same age as your Wren. When I heard that, I thought about how easily it could have been her in that warehouse. Tracker looked at her. That's why this matters, Raven continued. Not just prosecuting Stone, but building something that protects kids like them, like Wren, like you were after your parents died. Something better than what exists now. How do we do that? We start by winning this case, by proving the system can work when people push it to, and then we build on it, create programs, resources, actually help instead of just processing paperwork. I want to help, Tracker said, after this is over, however I can. Raven smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. 3 weeks before the trial, everything changed. Brennan showed up at the safe house with new information. Her expression was grim but determined. We found the corruption, she said without preamble. Someone in local law enforcement has been protecting Stone, tipping him off, bearing evidence. Who? Raven asked. County Sheriff Thomas Hayes. The name hung in the air like an accusation. Hayes was a public figure, 23 years in law enforcement. Respected, known for his tough on-crime stance. How certain are you? Raven asked. We traced offshore accounts, encrypted communications, $100,000 a year for 6 years. In exchange, he gave Stone advance warning on investigations on quashed warrants made evidence disappear. How many cases did he bury? We're still counting, but preliminary estimates are over 40 investigations in 6 years that went nowhere because Hayes interfered, which means dozens of victims who could have been saved if he'd done his job. Tracker listened, feeling sick. So all those kids, they suffered longer because someone who was supposed to protect them was taking bribes instead. Yes, Brennan said simply. Can you prove it? Raven asked. We have financial records, communications, a pattern of failed investigations that correlates exactly with Hayes's interventions. Brennan looked at each of them. We're arresting both of them tomorrow. Hayes and Stone, simultaneous raids, no warning. I want to be there, Raven said, when you arrest Stone. Brennan started to protest, then reconsidered. I'll arrange it, but you stay back. This is our operation. Understood. The arrests happened at dawn. Tracker watched from an FBI surveillance van as tactical agents surrounded Victor Stone's mansion in South Tampa. The breach was fast, professional, overwhelming. Stone was let out in handcuffs 3 minutes later. His expensive suit wrinkled his expression, carefully controlled. Raven stood on the sidewalk as they walked him past. Stone saw her. Their eyes met. You should have taken the deal, he said quietly. Raven's smile was ice. You should have stayed out of my city. They put him in an unmarked car and drove away. Across town, Sheriff Hayes was being arrested at his home. By noon, both men were in federal custody. By evening, every news channel in Florida was covering the story. Tracker stood in the safe house apartment, watching the coverage with Wren. We did it, she said quietly. Not yet, Tracker replied. They're arrested, but the trial still has to happen. They could still get away with it. Do you think they will? I don't know. He looked at her, but I'm going to do everything I can to make sure they don't. 4 months later, the trial began, and Tracker Sullivan prepared to tell the truth that would either put monsters in prison or set them free. The courtroom was smaller than Tracker had imagined. He'd seen legal dramas on TV back when he had a home, back when his biggest worry was what college classes to take. Those courtrooms were grand, dramatic. This one was just ordinary. Fluorescent lights, worn carpet, the kind of space that processed human tragedy with bureaucratic efficiency. Victor Stone sat at the defense table wearing an expensive suit, looking bored. His lawyer, Patricia Vance, was arranging documents with the precision of someone who'd done this 100 times before. At the prosecution table, Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Garrett reviewed his notes. He'd spent weeks prepping Tracker, walking him through what to expect, how to answer questions, how to handle cross-examination. Just tell the truth, Garrett had said during their final prep session. The evidence speaks for itself. You just need to verify what the photos show. Now sitting in the witness waiting room with Wren beside him, Tracker wasn't sure truth would be enough. You're going to do great, Wren said with the confidence of someone who'd already survived worse than a courtroom. What if I mess up? What if I say the wrong thing? Then you'll fix it. She squeezed his hand. You saved someone's life. You took pictures of bad people doing bad things. You're telling the truth, that's all that matters. A bailiff appeared at the door. Tracker Sullivan. They're ready for you. Tracker stood on shaking legs, looked at Wren one more time. Go get him, she said, smiling. The walk from the waiting room to the witness stand felt like miles. Every eye in the courtroom turned to watch him. Stone's cold gaze, Raven's encouraging nod from the gallery, the jury's curious assessment. He took the oath, sat down, met the prosecutor's eyes. Mr. Sullivan, can you tell the court what you witnessed on the morning of September 14th? Tracker took a breath. I was living under the I-275 bridge. I woke up around 6:30 and saw 2 men on the highway above me. They were using bolt cutters to cut through the guardrail support structure. Did you know what they were doing at the time? No, I just thought it was strange. So I took pictures with my phone. Garrett displayed the photos on screens around the courtroom. 4 images, clear, time-stamped 6:47 a.m., 2 men with tools, metal being cut. What did you do after taking these photos? I deleted them from my recent folder to save space on my phone, then I left, went looking for food, tried to forget about it. When did you realize the significance of what you'd witnessed? That night, when I pulled Raven Morrison from the river, when police told her the guardrail had been sabotaged. Garrett walked him through the rest, the crash, the rescue, disappearing afterward, being found by the angels 3 days later. And these are the 2 men you photographed. Garrett showed him images of Webb and Delgado. Yes. No further questions. Patricia Vance stood for cross-examination. She was good. Tracker could see that immediately. The way she moved, the calculated pause before speaking. Mr. Sullivan, you were homeless when you took these photos, correct? Yes. Living under a bridge, no permanent address, no stable housing. Yes. And you claim you just happened to see these men cutting a guardrail that morning. I didn't know who they were. I just saw 2 men with tools doing something that seemed wrong. Vance paced. Isn't it possible you're mistaken about what you saw, that in your difficult situation, you misinterpreted routine maintenance work? It wasn't maintenance work. They were deliberately cutting through support structures. But how can you be sure you were homeless, Mr. Sullivan? Presumably dealing with significant stress, poor nutrition, inadequate sleep. How reliable can your memory really be? Tracker felt anger rise in his chest. Being homeless doesn't make me blind or stupid. I saw 2 men sabotaging a guardrail 7 hours before it failed and nearly killed someone. That's not a misinterpretation. That's what happened. Alleged sabotage. The photos are time-stamped. Tracker interrupted. The metal shows cut marks. Those are facts, not allegations. Vance tried a few more angles, but Tracker held firm. Just the truth, like Garrett had taught him. When he stepped down, he caught Raven's eye in the gallery. She nodded once. Approval. Raven testified on the third day. She walked to the stand with the same quiet authority she brought to everything. Took the oath, sat down and looked directly at the jury. Garrett led her through the meeting with Stone. The proposal, the trafficking routes, her refusal. Why did you refuse Mr. Stone's offer? Because my father was a victim of child trafficking, Raven said steadily. Taken from Mexico when he was 10. Sold, exploited. He escaped as a teenager, but never recovered from the trauma. When I was 15, he took his own life. The courtroom was silent. When Victor Stone asked to use my territory to move what he called human cargo, I knew exactly what that meant. Children being bought and sold like products. I could never allow that. Not after what it did to my father. What was Mr. Stone's response to your refusal? He said, and I quote, "Accidents happen, Raven. You should be careful." 12 hours later, someone tried to kill me. The defense tried to shake her during cross-examination, questioned her credibility, suggested she was biased. Raven never wavered, just stated facts with the certainty of someone who'd survived worse than courtroom theatrics. "Ms. Morrison, isn't it true you run a criminal organization? I run a motorcycle club. We're not criminals. Come now, the Hells Angels have a reputation. For loyalty, for protecting our own, for standing up to people who hurt children." Raven's voice was steel, which is exactly what I did when I refused to help Mr. Stone traffic kids. If that makes me a criminal in your eyes, then I'm proud to be one. The rescued children testified through closed-circuit video, faces hidden, voices small but clear. They described the warehouse, the locks, the fear, the men who kept them prisoner. One of them, the 9-year-old, also named Ren, spoke last. "Did anyone come for you?" Garrett asked gently. "Yes, the FBI. They broke down the doors and got us out." "Do you know why they found you when they did?" The girl nodded. "Because someone took pictures of bad people doing bad things, and because someone wouldn't stop fighting to find us." She looked toward the gallery where Raven sat. She made them keep looking, and they did. The jury deliberated for 11 hours. Tracker spent that time in a conference room with Ren, Raven, and Dutch. Nobody talked much, just waited. When the bailiff finally called them back, Tracker's heart was pounding so hard he thought it might break through his ribs. The jury filed in. None of them looked at Stone. That was supposed to be a good sign. Or was it bad? Tracker couldn't remember. The four women stood. "On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree, how do you find guilty? On the charge of human trafficking of minors, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to traffic persons across state lines, guilty. Guilty on all 17 counts." The judge sentenced Victor Stone to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sheriff Thomas Hayes, tried separately 2 weeks later, received 25 years in federal prison. 12 of Stone's associates received sentences ranging from 15 to 30 years. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed them. "How do you feel about the verdict?" Raven's answer was simple. "Justice was served. Children are safe. That's what matters." "Is it true you mobilized your entire organization to find a homeless witness?" "I mobilized my family to find someone who saved my life. There's a difference." "What's next for you?" Raven looked at where Tracker stood with Ren, both of them trying to stay out of the cameras as sightlines. "Must we make sure these kids have futures worth living, that they never have to feel invisible again?" 6 months after the trial, Tracker Sullivan celebrated his 19th birthday. He'd almost forgotten. Birthdays hadn't mattered much when he was homeless. Just another day to survive. But Raven remembered. She showed up at the auto shop where Tracker now worked full-time, leading a small group of angels. Dutch, Hawk, 3 others he'd gotten to know. "We're closing early today," she announced. Tracker looked up from the engine he was rebuilding. "Why, Paul? Because you've earned something." She pulled a patch from her jacket, small, embroidered. The Hells Angels insignia with one word beneath prospect. "You're not full patch yet," Raven said. "That takes years of proving yourself. But your family, and family gets recognized. Tracker stared at the patch, at the physical symbol of belonging he'd never expected to have again. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just keep being who you are. Keep showing up. Keep doing the work. She handed him an envelope. Also, this came for you. Inside was a letter from Florida State University. His deferred acceptance had been reinstated. They wanted him for the next incoming class. Full scholarship. I can't afford, Tracker started. Scholarship covers tuition. Raven interrupted. And the Angels have a fund for family pursuing education. Room, board, books, living expenses. It's yours if you want it. Tracker looked from the letter to the patch to Raven's steady gaze. I want both, school and this. I don't want to choose. You don't have to. We'll make it work. Tracker started at Florida State that fall while continuing to work part-time at the shop. He studied social work, maintained a 3.7 GPA, showed up for his shifts, proved himself, Ren placed with a carefully vetted foster family that Raven had personally investigated, visited every weekend, helped at the shop, stayed close to the only people who had actually fought for her. The foster family, the Johnsons, were different. They remembered her birthday, asked about her day, actually listened to the answers. Slowly, carefully, Ren began to believe that maybe not all adults were terrible. 3 years passed. Tracker graduated with his bachelor's degree, started working toward a master's in social work while helping Dutch run the shop and mentoring other at-risk youth who came through the Angels network. He was 21 years old, had an apartment he paid for himself, had a life built on choices rather than survival. On a rainy Tuesday evening, driving back from a speaking engagement at a community college where he'd shared his story with at-risk students, Tracker saw the accident. A sedan hydroplaning on I-275, spinning out of control, slamming into the guardrail, the reinforced guardrail installed after Raven's crash, new safety standards implemented. But the impact was severe enough to flip the car anyway. It rolled twice, came to rest on its roof in the shallow water at the river's edge. The same river, almost the same spot where everything had changed 3 years ago. Tracker pulled over, didn't think, didn't calculate the risk, just ran. By the time he reached the car, water was seeping through broken windows. It saw a man unconscious in the driver's seat, a woman struggling with her seatbelt, and in the back a child, 7 years old, screaming. Tracker's hands remembered what to do, how to force open a jammed door, how to unbuckle a seatbelt with shaking fingers under pressure, how to pull people free of twisted metal and carry them to safety. He got all three out. The woman first, then the child, finally the man. Dragged them to shore just as the car settled deeper into the water. The woman grabbed his hand as paramedics arrived. Thank you. God, thank you. You saved us. Just doing what someone once did for me, Tracker replied. A news crew appeared, started filming. A reporter approached with microphone extended. Sir, can you tell us what happened? Tracker looked at the camera, at the reporter, at the gathering crowd. A family's car flipped. They needed help. I helped. But you risked your life. Someone once taught me that we have a responsibility to take care of each other, Tracker interrupted. Especially when it's hard. Especially when it's scary. Her name is Raven Morrison, and she showed me that heroism isn't about being fearless. It's about showing up anyway. The story ran on every local news channel that night. By morning, it had spread across social media. By afternoon, national outlets were picking it up. Former homeless teen saves family at the same river where his life was saved 3 years earlier. Raven called him that evening. Saw the news, she said. Couldn't stay away from that river, could you? Tracker smiled. Apparently not. Must run in the family. Must. A pause. I'm proud of you. Not because you pulled those people out, but because you've become exactly who I hoped you'd be when we found you under that bridge. What's that? Someone who pays it forward. Someone who takes what was given to him and multiplies it. Someone who doesn't just survive, but that shows others how to thrive. Tracker thought about the last 3 years, about the kids he'd mentored, about the homeless youth he'd helped connect with resources, about the life he'd built from nothing. I had a good teacher. We taught each other, Raven corrected. That's how family works. 1 year later, Tracker stood in front of a community center packed with 200 people. He was 22 years old, had his master's degree in social work, ran a program he'd founded called the River Project, providing job training, housing assistance, and mentorship to homeless youth across Tampa. Raven sat in the front row watching with quiet pride. Ren, now 13 and thriving in her foster placement, sat beside her. 4 years ago, I was homeless, Tracker said into the microphone. Invisible, forgotten. I saved someone's life and thought that was the end of the story. Just one moment that didn't change anything. He paused. But it wasn't the end, it was the beginning. Because Raven didn't just say thank you and move on. She decided that if one homeless kid deserved to be saved, then all of them did. And she helped me build something to make sure they were. His voice strengthened. The River Project has helped 73 young people find housing and employment in the past year. But more than that, we've shown them what Raven showed me, that they matter, that they have value, that someone cares. The applause was thunderous. After the event, as people filtered out into the night, Raven and Tracker stood outside watching. You did good, Raven said. We did good, Tracker corrected. A young woman approached them, early 20s, nervous smile. Excuse me, I'm Maya. I've been staying at the River Project shelter for 3 months. I just got hired today. Full-time position, benefits, everything. Her eyes were bright. I wanted to say thank you for caring, for fighting, for not giving up on people like me. After Maya left, Raven turned to Tracker. Remember what I told you 4 years ago about paying forward what was given to me? Yeah, you're doing it better than I ever could. You took pain and turned it into purpose, took tragedy and built something beautiful. I learned from the best. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights, the river visible in the distance. The river tried to take both our lives, Raven said finally. Instead, it gave us each other, gave us this. She gestured to the community center, to the River Project sign above the door, to the lives being rebuilt inside. I used to think strength meant never needing help, she continued, never showing weakness. But you taught me that real strength is knowing when to accept help, when to build something together instead of standing alone. Tracker nodded. And you taught me that being saved isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning. What you do with that second chance, that's what matters. Raven's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, smiled. Dutch says there's a chapter meeting tonight. You coming? Always. They walked to their motorcycles parked side by side. Tracker's was newer, a gift from the Angels when he graduated college. Raven's was the same bike she'd ridden for over a decade. They mounted up, started the engines. The familiar rumble filled the night. As they rode through Tampa's streets side by side, Tracker thought about the journey, about the boy who'd lost everything and chose to save someone anyway, about the woman who'd turned gratitude into family, about how the worst moments sometimes lead to the best ones. The river was behind them now, just water, just the place where two lives had intersected and changed everything, where debt became family, where survival became purpose, where one act of courage created a ripple that saved dozens of others. They rode toward the clubhouse, engines roaring, heading home to the family that had saved them both. And in their wake, 73 lives rebuilt. 8 children rescued from trafficking. 1 operation destroyed. A corrupt sheriff behind bars. A legacy proving what Tracker had known all along, even when he had nothing. That one person can make a difference. That heroism is a choice. That the people society overlooks sometimes have the biggest hearts. And that when you pull someone from drowning, when you show them they matter, when you give them family and purpose and hope, they don't just survive. They become the person who dives in to save the next drowning soul. The cycle continues, the river keeps flowing, and the people who care enough to jump in keep changing the world one rescue at a time.